Welcome to Door of Hope Christian Church, everyone. My name is Christy Misdom, and I'm the lead minister here at Door of Hope, and also team leader at Worldview Centre for Intercultural Studies, which some of you may know as the WEC Missionary Training College out in St Leonards. Door of Hope sits on the land of the Palawa people who for generations have met here alongside Kanamaluka, the Tamar River. We acknowledge the Palawa who were the first to experience God's creation here. We acknowledge current and emerging leaders and pray with hope for their future. We thank God for his good and beautiful creation and say that it is a privilege to stand on country and walk lightly in the footsteps of those who have walked here before us. Thank you to all of the candidates who have joined us tonight. We may have a couple joining us later. I thought we should do just a poll of hands. If they're late, should we let them on stage? Yes, agreed. Good. That's nice. We're not having punctuality as our highest value for voting this year. Access to the toilets are through the door that you came in, past the doors and then to the left. If there are any emergency announcements, please stay seated and we'll announce them from this stage, and we will pray that we won't have any. I want to introduce you to our candidates, although you've all been watching social media and TV, so you could probably introduce them maybe better than I could. So from the ALP, we have Janie Finlay. Welcome, Janie. From the Greens, Cecily Rossell in the green down there. From the Liberal Party, we've got Deputy Premier Michael Ferguson. Welcome, Michael, as well as Julie Sladen and Richard Trethui. Lovely to see both of you as well. Jack Davenport is an independent in this election, as well as Michael Friddich and also Mark Brown. Have we covered everyone? Yes. And I have had Melissa Anderson and also George Raze say that they could be making it, and if they come up, we will invite them to join us. Okay, why do we hold a candidate forum here at Door of Hope? Well, we believe that God made this world and loves all people and wants the best for them. And we also really care about our neighbours and care about our community and our state. And we want to know that we are voting well. When Jesus asked what were the instructions to live by, he said two things: love God and love others. He also added gave us the instruction that we're also to love our enemies. They're included. Those we don't agree with, those we don't understand. These aren't easy instructions, but for over 2,000 years, Christians have desired very much to follow them. In Romans 13, it says, "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God." And we believe that too, and we want to participate in this process of electing our officials and being part of the state of Tasmania. We are called to be subject to government, and the governments are called to rule justly and wisely. So to start, I'd like to pray for our candidates. Would you pray with me? Lord Jesus, Heavenly Father, Holy Spirit, thank you for bringing us here tonight. Thank you for our candidates who made their time available to come, and for those in the room and those watching online. Lord, thank you that you've given us this opportunity to listen well, to hear from each of the candidates and to hear their hearts and the direction that they are wanting to take their candidacy to. Lord, we pray for wisdom and discernment for each one of us as the candidates answer and as we hear and listen well. And also as we form our questions, would you give us guidance? Thank you for this evening, and we commit it to you. Amen. Amen. Okay. So invitations have gone out to all of the candidates in this forum, and that's our value at Door of Hope, to ensure that all candidates have the same opportunity to share their positions with us. Slido. We're going to be using a online tool called Slido tonight, and we're going to be using that to gather questions as we go through the evening. So this can be used in person here and online. And on the screen, you will see a QR code. If you have a device, you are able to scan that QR code, or you can go to slido.com and enter that code, 8750704. If you don't have a device, maybe you need to go and sit next to someone who has one. We won't be taking questions from the floor tonight, just through this system, and they're the questions that we'll be asking. You can like the questions when you see them come up on your device. So once you're in, you can type in a question, but you can also like other questions. And as we go on tonight, I'll see those questions come through. And if there's some that have many likes, we will probably ask that question and maybe leave the ones that have no likes to last. But I get to choose. So we'll see what happens, shall we? I'll try to be as fair as possible. I also may not ask them in order. So if you get in first, I will try to look for those, but you can be asking them all through the evening. We have invited each party representative to introduce themselves for 2 minutes to start the evening. So we're going to get into that in just a little second. We've also set pretty strict time limits tonight. Each person will get 2 minutes to introduce themselves, and then each answer to the questions will be also 2 minutes, and we'll give them a 10-second warning. So at a minute 50, they'll get a warning, and they can continue speaking after that. Do we understand the rules, everyone? Good. Okay, so we have about 50 people online watching in at the moment, so don't forget that they're all at home, and you can look down that camera where Ollie is in the white shirt if you want to say hi to them. And we have about 50 in the room. So we have gone through all of those. We'll also alternate direction for answers. So we'll introduce going that way, and then we'll start the questions coming back the other way. Now, let's start with the introduction. And for this, we need the microphone, which is on. Would you like to start, Jane? Great.
Good evening, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be here this evening and to speak to those people at home as well. My name's Janie Finlay, and I'm a proud member of the Labor Party, and I see myself as one of the hardest working people in the Tasmanian Parliament, and I do that because I love our community. I love Northern Tasmania, but all of Tasmania and what it offers both here at home, but also the incredible reputation that we have across the country and across the world. One of the reasons why I put my hand up 2.5 years ago to stand for the Tasmanian Parliament is because I believe that we can have a better future in Tasmania. For younger people, for opportunity, for working people. I've got the incredible pleasure to be the Shadow Minister for Primary Industries, so I work now with our fishers and our farmers, for our hard-working regional Tasmanians, but also to support and care for people in our community in a much deeper way, and I think in a much more human way that we currently see from time to time. So as a person that has a very deep and broad experience, I've been a barista, I've been a business broker, I've worked in businesses, in tech companies that work all around the world, I've spoken on stages all around the world. I stay here in Launceston, in Bass, because I love it. I believe that the Tasmanian Labor Party really care about people, and we care about the way people are supported to live their best life. And for me, who's seen it all across both Tasmania and the world, I believe that in Tasmania now, we are seeing things that we haven't seen before, and it requires a new approach, and it requires a different way. And we believe together at the Tasmanian Labor Party that as a team, we have grown and united to a strength where we can provide a different offering to Tasmania. So as somebody that has been in small business, I've had award-winning small businesses in here, I understand the strength of jobs, the importance of the economy, and I understand that when that's strong, we can be together to support our community. So on the 23rd of March, and I'll have the time to say this again later in the night, I ask for your number one vote and for the Labor Party to have your support on the 23rd of March when we go to the polls. Thank you.
Thanks, Janie. And Michael, you may feel free to stand or sit.
I'll stand, thank you.
That's fine.
That was a hard one to follow, I suppose. But, good evening. I'm Michael Friedrich. I'm a recent arrival in Launceston, hence nobody really knows me here, but when I say arrival, I came from Mole Creek, Meander Valley, where I was on council for a while. I was the president of the Tourism Association. So I've been getting involved in community for quite a long time. One thing that's been said here that we need a new approach, and this is why I got involved, because we keep hearing the same promises, we keep hearing the same failures, and I believe that the project management is something that is really lacking, and this based on my 30 years experience around the world, I believe I've got a lot to offer in that department. We've got two big parties, and they need to be kept in check, but they can only be kept in check if we know what we're talking about. So, Shooters and Fishers Party is, I know a lot of people get put off by the word shooter. It's not as bad as all that. It's more about fishing, hunting, and basically keep the nature the way it needs to be looked after, not just by building parks and building homes and so on and so on. We must not forget that Tasmania, and why people come to Tasmania, is our nature, is our fishing, is our whatever pastimes you really want to get involved. If we lose that, we lose Tasmania. I don't believe we need to get bigger. I believe we need to get better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight, and for our online audience, and thank you for Door of Hope putting this on. So my name's Mark Brown. I arrived in the 90s here from New Zealand, and I went to the Wet College, met my wife, and we've brought up our family here with 4 children. Over the course of the last 25 years, I've had a number of roles: pastor, quality control officer, or coordinator, so I've got a quality background. At the moment, I'm a driving instructor / pastor, but the last few weeks I've been campaigning as a candidate, obviously. So lots of experience. I suppose the one I missed out was I was the Australian Christian Lobby state director for 8 years, so I've got a little bit of understanding about politics and how it works. And so I never thought I'd be at this side of the candidate forum where I'm actually speaking, but it's a real privilege to be in this spot. And you might have seen my signs around. I'm pretty straightforward in the things that I'm saying. I'm saying the stadium is not a good idea at the moment. We've got so many other priorities, and we've got obviously needs in housing, in unemployment, in obviously the homeless situation, the hospitals, waiting lists, etc. So there's so many other needs. So that is just not a priority. So I'm saying let's put the priorities where they should be, and that's my main message. And if you'd like to support that in any way, then I've got some material that you can take with you tonight to help with my campaign. But we're likely to have a minority government, and so it's important to understand what us as independents could bring, and the balance of power, and what that might mean, and the things that we can contribute to that as an independent. So I thank you again for your interest, and look forward to the questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. We have Cecily Russell from the Greens Party.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I stand here tonight as a Christian and as a Greens candidate, which I know for some people is a contradiction, but I hold these two aspects of my life together comfortably. More than 20 years ago, I came to Launceston to study the Bible at Worldview Centre for Intercultural Studies. And by the end of my degree, I had a broader, more holistic understanding of salvation that extended to the whole of life and creation. The biblical narrative from start to finish is one of inclusion of all things and all people in God's transformation, culminating in wholeness, completeness, and well-being, as captured by the word shalom. Now, before joining the Greens, I researched their values and principles, and there are 4 pillars at the heart of the Greens: ecological sustainability, social justice, grassroots democracy, and peace and non-violence. And each of these pillars aligns beautifully with the gospel of salvation. Ecological sustainability is about caring for our earth and its incredible creatures. It's about protecting the gift God has given us and working to restore environments. Ecological sustainability is about being part of God's salvation work for creation. Social justice is the work of undoing inequality, binding spiritual and physical powers that are harmful, addressing social problems that damage and destroy people, and ensuring all people have access to all they need to live safely and well. Again, part of God's salvation. Grassroots democracy is about all people being respected for their value and worth. It's about seeing people as God does, marvellous, wonderfully made creations who reflect the image of God. It's about giving dignity and inviting, welcoming and empowering all people to share their voice.
10 seconds.
Part of salvation. Peace and non-violence, Jesus went to the cross rather than fighting back. Again, this is God's salvation come into our relationships. These pillars are the foundation upon which all Greens policies rest. They're not in contradiction of biblical values, the gospel or God's plan for the salvation and restoration So I stand here proudly and boldly as both a Christian and a Greens candidate, and I invite you to consider voting Green.
Thank you. Jack Davenport, who's an independent. Welcome,
Yeah,
Jack.
thank you. Good evening, everyone. So this is going to be a bit of a weird experience for me, and it may be one for you. So I'm going to start off by telling you that I am an atheist. So I do not share your faith. But I was raised as a Catholic. And when my father died when I was 2, I was raised by my mother and my widowed maternal grandmother. And I remember distinctly the experiences of being raised in my family, not just by my mother and grandmother, but extended family who rallied around my mother at that moment. And you've got to imagine this is the 1980s in the UK under Margaret Thatcher, hardly the best friend of any single mother, widowed or otherwise. So this was the family in which I was raised by. I went to Catholic primary school, Catholic secondary school, even a Catholic college before I went to university. I went to church. I have read the Bible. I understand the matters of faith, of Christian faith, particularly of being Catholic, being baptized, having done sacrament of confession, communion, and also confirmation. But I am not Catholic. I am not Christian. And the reason I'm telling you this is because it could be very easy to come before you and to tell you what you want to hear, or to somehow cloak my beliefs and my attitudes in some way. But I'm not going to do that with you, because it would be, I think, an offense to you, and it would offend my own sensibility as well. So even if it does cost me your vote, I am going to try and be as honest with you as I can. And that's really what I want to explain about how I intend to be as a candidate. So the things I might say tonight you won't necessarily agree with, but it will be my honest opinion. And in the measure of things, I hope that counts for something. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Deputy Premier.
Thanks, Christy. Good evening, everybody, and pay respect to all of my fellow candidates on the stage. Particularly appreciated yours just now, Jack. That was very raw and honest, and I respect that a lot. Well, I am a Christian, and I'm not proud to be a Christian. I'm grateful to be able to follow Jesus, imperfectly as I do. I'm called to this work, I believe, and I don't try to equate my Christian values that my parents and my church community have raised me with the Liberal Party. I don't try to marry up the party with the faith. I place my faith at a much higher place than my political party. I'm a Christian first. But that said, I seek to be the person that I represent myself to be, and that is a man who wants to live by an example, but also to fight for the whole community. We often talk about the business community and the importance of the economy. They are so important. For me, I got into politics because of family in the community, and through my now 20 years, I've gone grey, for my 20 years since I first stood on this stage at an ACL forum in 2004, I've done a lot, and throughout all that time I hope that people will see that I've been faithful to my word in standing up for faith and family and freedom and the most vulnerable in our community. Imperfectly, but that's been my wish, and I hope that that's what my reputation would speak of. I've been in opposition, I've been in government, and for now we as a government are 10 years old this Friday, tomorrow actually, and we're celebrating that, but looking only to the future based on our record. We've turned Tasmania around as a team, and from my own point of view, I do seek respectfully and humbly continued support from our community. I hope in the future to continue to earn and be worthy of your support as I continue to fight for what's important to local families, and obviously I look forward to taking questions on matters of importance to our local Christian community as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Richard.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Richard Trethewey. I grew up in the foothills of Ben Lomond on a farm, Blessington to be precise, and I've lived and worked in Launceston most of my life, and this is where we've raised our family. I ran a successful financial planning firm for over 40 years, and I'm proud to say that over that time we've helped hundreds of families achieve financial security. I learnt very early on the importance of giving, and I'm someone that has always endeavoured to contribute and give back to the community. I've always cared about health, and I was a founding trustee and board member of the Clifford Craig Medical Research Fund. I've mentored at the Launceston Church Grammar School, assisting students with goal setting and how to put together business plans and that sort of thing, and served on their foundation board. I served Rotary for over 24 years, quite actively, including a term as president, and was awarded a Paul Harris Fellow. City Prom awarded me their Management Award for Excellence. I've chaired the Financial Planning Association, and my motivation for standing, I look at what's coming at Tasmania, and I do care, and I want to use my knowledge and experience, and I hope some common sense, to raise the bar and really make a difference. I do worry about...
10 seconds.
10 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And Julie on the end.
Can I have the extra 10 seconds?
Sure. There has to be a bonus to going last.
Hi everyone, I'm Julie Sladden, as my name on my shirt says, and during campaigning I can honestly say that some days it's good that it's on there because I just need to check occasionally. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and thank you everyone for tuning in online and paying attention and giving your time to finding out about the candidates. It's really important that we have people who are interested in our democratic process. So a bit about me. I'm standing here before you for two reasons. Number one, I'm a doctor who is passionate about community wellbeing. And number two, I feel very much so over the last 5 to 10 years of my journey as a doctor that I felt led to become more and more involved in the public and political sphere. So a bit about me. I grew up in Georgetown. I have a husband, long-suffering husband of 28 years, and he's not here because if he was here, he would say it's 80. He's lying. I have two boys who are, well, they're actually now men, 21 and 23. And they went to the Launceston Christian school and have now heading off on their own education path. But I studied medicine at the University of Tasmania after leaving my childhood home in Georgetown. And then I entered the general practice program, and my husband, I got married while I was a medical student, and we moved to the UK. The children were born over there, and we returned back to Tasmania in early 2006, and we've been here ever since. And I have been serving the community as a GP and a hospital doctor during that time. So over the last 10 years, I've become more aware of how well-being is actually connected very much to government and politics and things that are happening in the community as far as community services and issues that are important to people in their day-to-day life. For example, cost of living, education and health. So I've become more involved in writing and speaking, but also lobbying as well. And in 2022, I actually stood for local government and became elected as a West Hamer councillor. And that's probably all. That's probably my last 10 seconds used up, so I'm going to stop there.
Now, George, we took a vote earlier and decided that even though you were late, you could still introduce yourself. So well done. We are good voters. 2 minutes, yeah.
Oh, thanks. 2 minutes only. Well, thank you so much for inviting me first. I am George Razai. I am a consultant geriatrician at Launceston General Hospital, professor in medicine, University of Tasmania, and councillor at the City of Launceston. My main vision has been promoting healthy and happy community. I remember when I started to campaign for council election, they said, but health and well-being is not the job of a councillor. But yet, it's so important because I think every level of government, from local to state to federal, should put health and well-being as important policy. And yet, when I was a councillor first year, we managed to set up a workshop, and now health and well-being has become one of the priority strategy in the next 4 years. My other vision will be how we can improve our hospital. I've been working for 27 years, and it has been the best years of my life. And probably you talk to people in the hospital, say, George is always happy despite all these years, despite all the changes. Because we argue about what's the best way in our system, because we are aiming at improving our system for better. And that means we need to collaborate all together, both state and federal. And I think we can achieve a great deal by improving the bed situation and creating more beds in hospital. I'm also interested as well on air pollution in the city, because I realize we have got the highest rate of respiratory illnesses and cancer in the whole of Australia. How come when we live in the best fresh air in Australia? And you realize the most important...
10 seconds.
10 seconds. Most important factor is transport. It's the main contributor to air pollution. And I think we can do a great deal by living active life, like walking, cycling, and we're by creating public transport. But we need it more efficient, reliable, and cheaper than using car. Thank you so much.
Thank you, George. You keep that microphone for just a moment. You can keep that for a moment and have
thanks.
a seat.
Yeah.
Oh, just here. You can stay here.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you everyone, candidates, for introducing yourselves. And we're going to move on to the 4 prepared questions that you've already had. These questions were prepared with consultation with some of our denominational leaders in Tasmania, and these were the 4 that were the highest priority for those denominational leaders. So we're going to start with question 1. The question will be on the screen so that you can read along as well. And we're going to start with the LGBTIQ conversion practices, and I'll read the preamble first. The Conversion Practices Bill, introduced in Victoria, criminalises Christian teaching about human sexuality and gender identity, and criminalises prayer with a person about their sexual orientation and gender identity, even when that person's consent. Given that the TLRI report was unable to establish that coercive practices with respect to sexual orientation and gender identity are currently taking place in Tasmania, we question why such legislation is even necessary. Section 46(1) of the Tasmanian Constitution protects freedom of profession and practice of religion. We are committed to individual freedom to choose how people respond to their own sexual orientation and gender identity, and to seek support for that choice. The question: will you, your party, promote legislation in this area that protects individual choice and freedom to respond to sexual orientation and gender identity in line with a person's Christian beliefs, and for churches to continue to teach and practice their faith on this matter without fear of criminal conviction or religious persecution? So we're going to start with George. If you'd like to remain seated during the question so that we can see each of you, and you have 2 minutes to respond. I'll give you a 10-second warning.
Thank you Thank you for that question. I really recognize the stress and difficulties that some members of our community have experienced throughout their life regarding sexual orientation and gender identity, especially regarding transgender people. I also like to emphasize the importance of giving them all the information and support to help them in making their decision, that our society look at them as equal in all aspects of life without gender discrimination. However, I also support individual rights and freedom of choices regarding sexual orientation and gender identity. This should not be at the expense of others. For example, regarding transgender in women, for example, in sport, as a man, I do not think that men understand how women feel when they are in vulnerable position. Women have the right of private spaces and play sport or using toilet in a manner they choose. And we have to respect that as well as to respect the right of others. We cannot infringe on on women's right. These rights have been there for centuries and for good reason, and this reason, by and large, still stand. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Janie.
Thank you. The bill that was travelling through the Parliament at the last parliamentary session prior to the election is not something that Tasmanian Labor has supported. Tasmanian Labor don't support conversion practices. We believe that Tasmania is one of the only places in Australia where full care of the individual choice has not been legislated fully. In government, Tasmanian Labor would look to recommence a process of consultation and development in community, across community, in terms of what legislation might look like for the future. A little like the contributions of Jack earlier, one of the things that I learnt very early on, over 20 years ago when I first started at the Launceston City Council, was that people in the community really appreciated direct and concrete responses to questions. So it's not the position of Tasmanian Labor to support what was currently going through the Parliament from the former Liberal government. But one of the things that I also learnt was in being direct, people would respect a position even if they didn't agree. And I think one of the things that is beautiful in this community is that over time, some of my and our party's greatest supporters are people that we've had differences with, but we're able to talk those through and get an understanding of each person's position on that and find a way to journey through that. So that is the position of Tasmanian Labor. And on this occasion, probably at odds with some in the community, although I do from time to time speak to a number of different congregations. I was at Scottsdale Salvation Army today, and I know that there are a variety of conversations that happen within the different churches in Tasmania as well around this issue.
Thank you, Janie. Michael.
I think on behalf of the party, being largely people of the land, we understand the importance of protecting individual freedoms, including the freedom to choose how one responds to their sexual orientation and gender identity. Our party upholds the principle of individual choice and respects the diversity of beliefs within our community. We believe in legislation that ensures individuals are free to seek support in line with their beliefs, including from religious institutions, while also safeguarding against coercive practices. We will advocate for legislation that protects individual autonomy and the freedom of expression while maintaining the right of churches and faith-based organizations to teach and practice their beliefs. Thank you.
Thanks. And to Mark?
So I support the fact that we should all treat each other with respect, with dignity, with understanding. But I believe that this conversion bill is a dangerous bill. I think we've seen that in Victoria and the way that it's shut down debate and basically cut off an avenue of support or a direction that some people may want to be taking and understanding their gender identity, their sexual orientation, but it's basically removed that as an option. And that's obviously in those spaces where people are thinking differently to what is the mainstream thinking on some of these issues. And so I don't believe that this bill is actually necessary, and I think it should be removed. I think at an individual level it curtails the freedom of choices that you have in the sort of help that you might be seeking. At a social level, at a bigger level, it restricts freedoms and freedom of conscience, freedom of thought, freedom of religion. So I just think it's a dangerous thing, and I don't think we should, we should set the standard. Even though other states and territories are doing it, I think we should be an exception.
Thanks, Mark. Boy, it's hard not to ask follow-up questions from up here, I must say. Thanks, Cecily.
Thank you. Just in terms of the preamble before this question, there are some inaccuracies in it because the TLRI did find evidence that and establish that conversion practices are happening and causing harm in Tasmania. And some conversion practitioners made submissions in which they asserted that they would continue with those practices. The Conversion Practices Bill in Victoria has not made it a criminal offence to engage in Christian teaching around sexual orientation and gender identity, but it says it's an offence to try and cause someone to change or suppress their their sexual orientation or gender identity. When it comes to consent, I think it's a really complicated thing because churches are very powerful and communities are very powerful. And when we say to somebody, oh, it's okay for you to think what you want to think or be who you want to be, we can be saying that with our words and treating people differently with our actions, and people can be very sensitive to that. So I don't think it's actually possible to say clearly and strongly, oh, consent, people should be able to consent to this practice, partly because the practice is wrong and the practice denies people the right to be who they are. That's part of the fullness I was talking about earlier, the fullness of who people are made to be. They're not sinful because they have a certain sexual orientation or gender identity. And so when we suggest practices or suggest beliefs and our thoughts, we can be harming people by doing that. So as the Greens, we support laws that will ban attempts to suppress or change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity. This does not extend to a ban on people expressing religious or personal opinions, so long as no one's harmed by the expression of those opinions. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecily. Jack.
Yeah, thank you. My understanding of the legislation is that, if anything, it probably doesn't go far enough in limiting and preventing conversion practices. So I would actually feel they probably would have to go even further, but I see nothing in the legislation that would prohibit the expression of religious faith. But it is unthinkable to me, this idea that conversion practices could be deemed acceptable in any world where humanity is the primary concern. And I find it a little ironic that a matter of faith and religion is being rested upon an artificial construct of the Tasmanian Constitution, a document which itself is aging and creaking under the weight of its own failures and riddled with more holes than the Swiss cheese factory with a mouse infestation. If that is the defense for conversion practices, then you have no defense. There's nothing in the legislation that would prohibit you from practicing your faith or expressing it, but you have no right to impose that upon others. And as Cecily was alluding to around consent, power is a really critical thing to understand, particularly where consent is concerned. And so being self-aware of the power that your faith and religion may have over people is something that is going to be quite vital. But I support a ban on conversion practices completely.
Thanks for the question. I think I'd agree with any of my colleague candidates who have said we must love each other, we must care for each other and respect our differences. What some people and organisations, including some panellists tonight, are trying to do is in fact to criminalise what is reasonable and positive behaviour by parents and faith communities and church groups. And I will answer yes to the question and make it very clear that that is my answer to the question, yes. We will promote legislation that protects individual choice and for churches to continue to teach and practice their faith on this matter without fear of criminal conviction. And you should demand that answer of every person on this stage, quite honestly. But there is a bill before the community which hasn't been taken to Parliament to correct a previous speaker, but as is open for community consultation. It contains a number of key statements, including that expression of belief or opinion is not a conversion practice, including a statement of religious principle. Victorians can't say that. And the bill also makes it clear that support or guidance that may be provided to a person by their family or in religious or spiritual settings is not a conversion practice. I realise that time will be against me, but I want to restate that from the Liberal Party point of view, we are committed to the provisions of the bill which is there for public consultation, and it does have embedded within it protections provided for the expression of religious beliefs, but there's also parents and of course a recognition that the Anti-Discrimination Act provides other protections for religious expression, and so should not just the Christian community but any other faith community should have those expectations in place.
Thank you, Michael. Richard, would you like to answer?
Thank you. I would just say that I fully endorse Michael's comments, and in the interests of time, I can't really add to that, but I would just stress that I fully endorse the comments by Michael.
My answer to the question is yes.
Okay. You can keep the microphone there if you like, Julie. Thank you, candidates, for answering that first question. We're going to move on to a question on gambling now. Gambling is a significant problem throughout Australia, but also in Tasmania, with almost 400 million lost in 2020-2021 in this state alone. This equates to Tasmanian gamblers losing over $1 million every day, or on average, almost $1,700 per person annually. What's more, Tasmanians from socio-economically disadvantaged LGAs, or local government areas, were 70% more likely to seek help for gambling problems. In response, the Tasmanian Liquor and Gambling Commission recommend the implementation of a universal card system for poker machines as recommended, which would have the following essential features. People need a card in order to gamble on any poker machine in Tasmania, binding pre-commitment and default loss limits. A single card is issued per person, and the system operates across all venues with poker machines. The question: do you support the full implementation of a universal card system for poker machines as recommended by the Tasmanian Liquor and Gambling Commission? If not, how will you or your party develop, promote and implement legislation in this area to protect individuals and their families from the devastating financial, social and psychological effects which gambling brings? We'll start with Julie or with Michael down there.
Yeah, so thank you, Christian. We sometimes might just have one person answer for us if we all just agree, and the answer for us is an emphatic yes. In fact, we've pioneered this as a Liberal government, and some people can't understand why would a Liberal government be doing this? Because we want to put the power in the hand of the player, the individual. They get to decide their losses before they sit down at machines which are designed through their software to make you lose while making you think that you're winning. So we've pioneered this. Half of the grey hairs on my head are from about the last 18 months of extraordinary pressure that's been placed on me to walk away from this policy, including from politicians in the Tasmanian Parliament. It's been very hard, but I signed that ministerial direction as Treasurer in September 2022. It's one of the things I'm most proud of as a politician in 20 years. It will come into place at about this time next year. To be able to play one of the machines in a pub, club or casino, you'll need the card. It'll be easy to get the card, it'll be easy to prove your identity, and it'll be easy to decide in advance how much you can afford to lose, and then you're in charge. And if you want to lose more than $5,000 a year, you can. But you need to be able to show that you've got that sort of money to be able to lose. This is so pro-human. It's so good for Tasmania. It's good for business and it's fair for venues. And I can't see it come into place soon enough. And we're doubling down. Despite the pressure, we've decided to go a little bit further and we're adding $100,000 to promote the exclusion scheme in the meantime to help people who want to escape, to give them extra options to be able to sign up for that scheme until the card-based play is in place.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. I probably have to declare a slight, I suppose you might call it a personal interest in the political world. So I live with a number of mental health disorders, but one of them is a gambling disorder. So I am a gambling addict. I first gambled when I was 18, when I first went to university, and it took a number of years to break that addiction. And I certainly haven't gambled in well over probably 15 years now. But I guess I carry a very particular perspective around gambling and its insidious nature. My gambling is with, you obviously they're called pokies here, that we call them fruit machines in the UK, or one-arm bandits. They have a number of names. But I sort of recognized in myself certain, the way that it can manipulate and corrupt. We've also seen in this state how the gambling industry itself has manipulated and corrupted our politics. We've seen previous elections where they have poured huge levels of resources into the political system in order to engineer a victory for their party of preference. We have seen the major parties do deals with the poker industry. Now, one of those deals was exposed through a leak, and I honestly have to say, I think the Labour Party was played, and unfortunately they didn't realise that they were, but I think they were played. I think that it was always the intention to leak the Labour deal, but clearly the Liberals did as well. Undoubtedly, a huge amount of money has come from the gambling industry to fund the Liberal Party, probably the Labour Party as well, and I would challenge them both to declare all of their donations from the gambling industry from the past 10 years
10 seconds.
by the end of today. But I fully support the card. I think we need to look more closely at the gambling industry and its insidious nature on our democracy. But I will support the card, and I do not trust that the current government will hold in the agenda of introducing it at the end of this year, next year, whenever it's due, because of the nature of the gambling industry and its grip on the political system here.
Thanks, Jack. Over to Cecily.
Thank you. Yes, the Greens support the full implementation of a universal card system and have been pushing for that for a long time and lobbying for it. In the last term of Parliament, Dr Woodruff was in the process of lobbying the former Attorney General Elise Archer, investigating ways the card system could be used in tandem with other non-custodial sentencing options around gambling if it forms part of offending. So the Greens are strongly committed to a universal card system, and just today we released a statement. Dr Woodruff released a statement confirming that. Unequivocally we support this, and we want to see all 4 of the aspects of the implementation actioned upon.
Yes, I 100% agree. Certainly in my time with the Australian Christian Lobby, that was a big part of my focus, was trying to get some reform in this area, and it was very, very difficult to get any movement simply because of the amount of money that these machines drew in for the clubs and pubs and casinos, but also for the government through the taxes. And so generally when there's money involved, it's very hard to get any change. And so I do pay compliments to how far the Liberals have gone in getting us to where we are today, and I really do hope it does eventuate next year, as we've been told. So well done, I would say.
I'll read it because otherwise I would talk too long. So, the issue of gambling is a significant concern, particularly considering its impact on individuals and families. While we recognise the recommendation by the Tasmanian Liquor and Gaming Association, more importantly, we believe in exploring comprehensive solutions that address the root causes of problem gambling. We are open to considering various measures, including the implementation of universal card system, as part of a broader strategy to mitigate the harmful effect on gambling on Tasmanian communities. Our party is committed to developing and promoting legislation that prioritizes the well-being of individuals and families affected by gambling addiction. I think I know the pokies are the target, which is okay, but if people gamble, they can gamble on anything. They can gamble online, they can gamble everything. So unless we actually address the reasons why people go and throw their money away at the expense of their families, I don't think we can stop gambling completely. And I think that's really where we need to go to the roots of the problem, rather to the problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Janie.
Thank you. Tasmanian Labor, for the years that I've been in the Parliament, support the implementation of card-based play. for us, it is all about harm minimisation. And as everyone tonight has said, and I'm sure Dr. Raze will also, that all people in public life are committed to ensuring that people receive and experience as least amount of harm as possible in their lives. So we support card-based play. But further than that, we believe in facial recognition technology and the benefits of that being used in community. It's been introduced really successfully in South Australia, and in fact in casinos in Tasmania already from late last year they've been using it. So up until this has been voluntarily implemented and it's being used in South Australia successfully, it required people at a venue to flip through pages in a folder of photocopies of people's faces and their names and whether that was a concern or not. And so there was a responsibility on the people working in venues to actually be familiar with people that might have presented as a concern. But there is technology available. The technology can be used and that can add further to harm minimisation, and Tasmanian Labor are very much supportive of that implementation.
For me, gambling, it's a question of individual right. But individual rights should not harm other people and should not be at the expense of other people. The bottom line is gambling is often paid by family and children, and we should not promoting it. A lot of harm is done by gambling. It can ruin life, not just for the persons themselves, but it can break down marriages and ruin their lives. I am not against gambling completely, but we need checks and balances in the same way as we have checks and balances when you drive a car. Protection not just for persons themselves, but for people who are affected by their compulsion or habit. But I'd like to raise another question. Our society over the last 20 years has been promoting wealth, and people have been obsessed by accumulating wealth, and gambling is another example of that. Sometimes you say, what's the difference? People obsessed with, for example, shares, and they can spend every day. And the reason for that, because they want to accumulate wealth. And I think it's a general question about our society. And the reason that why we have been having increasing gambling is because the whole culture of the society is about promoting wealth. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Raze. Okay, we're going to move on to a significant issue in Tasmania, which is housing and homelessness. Affordable housing and homelessness are two significant challenges facing the nation, particularly in Tasmania. I realise I've gone out of order, sorry, so you'll have to reshuffle. Last year, Anglicare's 2023 rent affordability snapshot affirmed Tasmania as the least affordable rental market in the country. For example, renting in Hobart has increased 60% since 2016, and rents across Tasmania have risen 10 times faster than income support payments. Not surprisingly, homelessness in Tasmania continues to increase. On Census Nights 2022, 2,350 Tasmanians said they were experiencing homelessness. This was a staggering 45% increase on Census Night 2016. Question: what will you or your party do to ensure vulnerable and low-income Tasmanians have access to safe housing? Dr. Raze, would you like to start?
I mean, probably we all agree the massive increase in house prices and high mortgages, which is contributing greatly in increased rents in our society. Homelessness is growing in a very fast. And I'll give you an example because I have been advocate for the suffering of our homeless people in Launceston. All you have to do is go to King's Wharf. This week I went and I looked and you could imagine the whole stretch of river is packed with tents and caravans. 1.5 years ago I was there and there were only 5 tents. That's reflection of how many, about the increase of homeless people. Homeless people are struggling, and they have got, some of them have got inability to pay rents, and they are being evicted without any protection. But a lot of people have mental illnesses. Some of them had been abused in their life. We need to have really look at eradicating homelessness. There are a lot of organizations are helping and supporting them, from providing food, hygiene, etc. But the best way to eradicate homelessness is to create housing. That's the only way. And I think government should take more active part in provide low-cost social housing. And both state and federal government have committed millions of dollars for that. But what we want is for them to work together. And we can achieve actually building cheap houses in Launceston in a faster rate. Recently, there is a company in Launceston where they can build really units very quickly and at very cheap rate. And I think we can achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no doubt that in Tasmania over recent years we've seen more and more homelessness in a way that we would never have imagined occurred in Tasmania. I mentioned earlier that I was in Scottsdale today and I was meeting with Peter at the Salvation Army, and they have a young local gentleman sleeping in a tent at the back of the property at the Salvation Army Church in Scottsdale at the moment. And when I was talking to Peter, he was talking about what are the options for this young man. And just recently in Scottsdale, there's been around 12 social housing, affordable housing developments, container-style homes developed in Scottsdale. And he said that when he heard that that was happening, it was a moment of joy for him. He thought, this is fantastic, because even in our regions, even in our small communities across Tasmania, they're experiencing a lot of homelessness in a way that they have never before. But unfortunately, these properties are in the market being managed by a private rental company at $280 to $320 a week. And so where you've got high density, small properties that are provided for exactly this purpose, they're still unreachable. Somebody who doesn't have rental history can't actually then go through the private rental market process to secure that housing. Tasmanian Labor have identified that currently there are over about 240 houses in the housing network that are not housing families because they need maintenance. Tasmanian Labor would, as a priority, make sure that those properties are maintained so families can move in. I often grapple with this idea that I speak regularly to people that are sleeping rough, that for different reasons, if they're in my office or I'm in another venue where they're getting support, and they don't need the Taj Mahal. They need safe, security, warm, dry places to sleep. And so we believe that there is work that we can done by the government to maintain properties now so families can immediately move in, because we don't need targets in 20 and 30 and 40 years. We actually need housing now, housing that's built quickly but that it's affordable.
Thank you. Michael.
Shooters, Fishers and Farmers is looking at it from the issue of affordable housing and homelessness is a pressing concern and requires urgent attention. SSF Tasmania acknowledges the significant challenges faced by vulnerable and low-income Tasmanian in accessing safe housing. Our party is committed to implementing comprehensive strategies aimed at addressing these challenges, including initiatives to increase the supply of affordable housing, support for rental assistance programs, investment in homelessness prevention and support services. We will work with stakeholders to develop and implement effective policies to ensure all Tasmanians have access to safe and affordable housing, regardless of their socioeconomic status. Having said that, again, building houses is only one part of the solution. Unless we sort out why there are such an increase of homeless people. I've just listened to the radio on the way here. We have the highest drug use now in Australia. We have issue problem. We have families. 18-year-old girl is homeless. Why should an 18-year-old person be homeless? And unless we solve those issues, we will never get ahead. As far as housing is concerned, if we just look at how many B&Bs are available in cities, I'm not sure whether we need to build more because there is more. There is plenty of land. There is land that's been bought by people for development 2 years ago. So I would like to see an audit of B&Bs. I would like to see an audit of land available for development already. So we don't have to start taking over farms and beautiful places like Beauty Point and so on and so on. The land is already there. So I would really like to see, again, it's a project, and it's not just one-sided. Just building the houses is not, it's a help, but it's not the answer.
Thank you. Mark?
So this problem of homelessness has been steadily getting worse. So down at the Silo, King's Wharf, the oldest or the longest term person there's been three years. So this is not something that we have not known about for a while, and that's why I'm concerned about the stadium, because it's setting a very clear message about what the priorities are. And that community down there is continuing to grow. I think there's 22 down there at the moment. So yes, there are things in the pipeline. There's federal programs. I think there's 1,200 houses going to be built over the next 4 years federally. State-wise, there's thousands of houses in the pipeline, but that's not going to help these people who are about to go into another cold Tasmanian winter. So there's got to be some immediate answers. And I've been asking around, and like Michael was saying, there is land that is available. There are buildings that are available that are empty, like the old UTAS accommodation at the moment, sitting there without being used. And there's got to be some immediate responses that we can look at, because, I mean, there are whole families living down there, children. And, yeah, we have options, and I think we just got to, I'm sure we all feel the same way, but unless something changes, nothing's going to change. So I think we need to be talking through all the 3 levels of government and asking the question, what can we do now, and how can we work collaboratively to make sure these families don't spend another winter in those tents?
Housing is a human right, and the Greens feel very strongly that we need to do more to address the housing situation in Tasmania. And we don't support a stadium because we think the money would be better spent on things that we need as a state, including housing. In terms of increasing housing supply, the Greens would push to establish a Department of Public Works that would deliver well-planned public housing. We would quadruple annual funding for public homes and build over 1,000 each year. We also would put a limit and a stop to new whole home short stay rentals. So that's regulating the Airbnb market to get more of those homes back into the rental market. And we'd phase out existing listings in residential areas. The Greens would also, so I'm jumping around in my things here, introduce a 1% vacant property levy. There's quite a lot of empty houses that are sitting there empty because the owner can get great capital gain from that, and without having to have anyone renting in there. So a 1% vacant property levy would encourage people to return their houses back into the rental market and make more housing available. In terms of people who are in homes, we want to see renters protected. We want to increase renters' rights. We want to put limits on unreasonable rate rises and also end no-cause evictions so that people have security in the homes that they have. So we have a whole range of measures that we would be working towards in Parliament, including increasing supply, but also protecting people in the homes where they are now. Thank you.
Thank you. It seems to me that one of the big challenges around housing and homelessness is that ultimately it's not treated as an aberration, but as being somehow normalized. And we do seem to be bearing the burden of a failed conservative economic ideology, not just at a state level, national, international. It is an international housing crisis. It is not just here, it is around the world. And this failed ideology has been weighed upon the scales and has been found wanting. And we need to change the mentality that we have about the nature of housing. Cecily highlighted that housing is a human right. I absolutely agree with that. We are in a state where children in the care of the state, this is where the law has actually said no one else can look after this child except the state. No one else is safe enough except the state, where the state is allowing children under its care to live in hotels or in tents or in unsafe environments. I have heard of children under the age of 10 being listed as in self-selecting placements. That's just the children in care. There are the children with families in cars, in tents, in caravans. There is an underlying sense of callousness at the heart of the government and the state. And as much as I could and would like to throw a lot of shade at the current Liberal government over the past 9 years, this has been decades in the making. There are many policies that we could look at enacting. There are empty homes. There's a levy option in the UK. They have an empty homes policy where local authorities can seize the empty home and bring it back into the market and make it available.
10 seconds.
Don't deny those kind of options. There are other options for housing. For example, making a statutory responsibility to house any child and their immediate family, regardless of the situation or circumstance of their homelessness, whether that needs legislation or it needs new policy to work with existing legislation. But there are steps that we can take to correct and repair the ethical failure at the heart of the Tasmanian governance.
Thanks for the very important question. This is a very confronting and real issue for every politician and candidate because it's a priority area for Tasmanians. We're seeing homelessness in a far more visible way than I believe I have seen before. I believe it's a very complex puzzle, by the way. I don't think anybody here, I'm seeing people nodding, nobody thinks it's simple as to its causes or its answers. Homelessness is a spectrum. Some people are at different positions along the home and security and insecurity spectrum. Some people are the most destitute, perhaps living in a tent, for example, behind a church in Scottsdale, Janie, would be the perhaps most obvious, most extreme example. And then there are many people who live a little further along on that spectrum. They're in insecure housing. And that's why George's comment I endorse, that the best way we can address it is with more supply, but at different points along that spectrum, because what suits one person won't suit a different person with their unique circumstances. We've established a new authority, Homes Tasmania, with a mandate to build 10,000 homes by 2032. Massive job. The building industry as it is right now is very, very busy. When I last looked at the numbers, I believe that the number of homes currently in the pipeline for construction is about 750, 700 in that range, a big number under commission. And by 27, we expect a further 2,000 on the 2023 number to be completed as well. We've just announced our housing policy as well, and given the time, I just encourage anybody with a key interest in this, please jump on our Liberal website and you'll see the complete other sets of solutions to help meet people where they're at, including a range of innovative approaches that we've designed with Shelter Tasmania, including what we call the private rental incentive scheme to bring more private stock into the social housing sector so that people who are entitled to social housing can get it through those additional properties that we've worked with landlords to provide. I'm sorry, time will beat me on this, but yeah, we're very passionate about this area.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you. I think, well, first of all, it's heartening that we are all passionate about this issue. And I'd like to think that it's an issue that we could work collaboratively to arrive at some solutions. The question that was raised earlier, why and how did we get in this position? Because it's something that has been evolving. We haven't just suddenly arrived and got there. I'm actually proud of the approach that the government's taken. I'm keeping in mind we're a state of less than 600,000 people, and we invest 60 cents in every dollar of income in health and education. On top of that, we've set aside 150 million a year for 10 years to build these 10,000 homes. And it goes further than that, because how are we going to do it? Well, we've tied up 4 companies, 2 in the south, 1 in the north, 1 in the northwest, to go flat chat and do nothing but build social and affordable houses for us. But the added benefit there is there's a requirement for them to put on a minimum number of apprentices and train them over 4 years, because another very telling issue when you go around different businesses, there's a huge skill shortage, and we need
10 seconds.
more tradesmen. And so we will not only get more houses, but we will also get skilled tradesmen. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a benefit to go last sometimes, but as I was listening to the candidates, I agree with you, Richard, in that it's obvious that everyone's passionate about this. This is an incredibly important issue for Tasmanians, especially right now. None of us have seen homelessness the way we are, so it's an acute problem, and it's especially acute with winter coming on. I think I agree, it's complex. It's not just about housing supply. It's not just about the public housing scheme, but it's multifactorial, and we do need to increase the number of houses that we have available, the number of houses that we're building, the accessibility to houses, but we also need to have a broader picture too on the story behind, each person who's ended up homeless, because the people that I've spoken to often have their stories are unique, but it can be something from as simple as, they were kicked out by their renter and haven't been able to by their landlord for whatever reason, and have been unable to find anywhere else because the rental market is so crowded at the moment. Or it could be cost of living pressures, and they've been unable to keep their property, or it could be some other circumstances. It could be health, it could be mental health that have led them to be homelessness. So whatever the solutions are, and there are some good solutions that have been put forward tonight, and I think the Liberal Party have a very comprehensive plan as well, but we're all going to have to work collaboratively to make sure that we address the not just the housing issues, but also the upstream effects of why people have ended up homelessness as well.
Thank you, Julie. If you'd like to keep that microphone with you. So we have a lot of Slidos coming through, and we'll get to those in just a second, mainly around health, Tassie infrastructure, and also education funding. But to our last question that you are ready for, employment and freedom to operate according to mission. Faith-based agencies and organisations in Tasmania contribute significantly to the care and well-being of the community in the form of social welfare agencies, schools, hospitals, aged care facilities, among others. Increasingly, both in Australia and around the world, we are seeing governments introduce legislation that would prevent such organisations from having the freedom to hire employees on the basis of alignment to the religious mission of the organisation, and the threat of government funding being removed if such organisations do not offer services or meet conditions which are incompatible with their religious mission and identity. The question is, will you, your party, commit to protect the freedom of faith-based organisations to operate according to their mission and identity with regard to their hiring and employment policies, and ensure that government funding will not be made conditional on the basis of meeting certain conditions that are incompatible with the religious beliefs of the organisation? So we might choose one of the Liberal candidates to respond.
Thank you. It's a complex question. I don't want to dodge around the question. There'll be certain circumstances I could see, and I say this as a Christian politician, where maybe a funding program that government may need to provide is just not going to be the kind of program that this faith-based organisation will want to be offering. I can't think of an example, but I can imagine that being the case. My general principle here is to be supportive of where this question is coming from. I can indicate, and we've discussed this as a Liberal team in the context of tonight's forum, we have no plans to make changes in this area. I think we certainly do want to continue to support faith communities in Tasmania. That is what a Liberal government should be doing, is encouraging, people to be able to live and express what they believe and be able to express that freely. We are seeing that being curtailed in many areas of public life, and we need to watch that very, very closely. But I want to make that point. We've no plans to change the relevant legislation which does offer those protections for freedom of religion. And the other comment that I was encouraged to make tonight in response to this is that, well, quite naturally, any contracts that government provides for funding to, let's say, a non-government organisation to deliver services, that in itself would need to be consistent with Tasmanian law. So with those statements perhaps as a coverall, not wanting to dodge the question, in short, we do want to encourage and permit and tolerate organisations that have different views perhaps to the orthodoxy of the government of the day to be able to flourish as well and to be able to live out their mission, whether it's Christian or other, in a way that's consistent with those values of that organisation. I could think, for example, of a Christian school with employment practices for its staff. I mean, that may be an important principle for that particular school. So I'll make those comments, and largely we're consistent with where that question is coming from.
Thank you. On to Jack.
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused, to be honest, because if your organisation is working to the care and well-being of the community, I would assume that you'd be hiring people under that basis. So I'm not quite clear how there would be some sort of conflict between the desire and needs of the state to provide for its citizens, and then somehow this would come into conflict with the religious organisation. Surely you would both be coming from the same angle, and therefore there wouldn't be that kind of prohibition on employing people that are separate from your faith or your belief, because they share the same mission, which is about the care and well-being of the community. So I'm not entirely sure how exactly there is any kind of barrier to people being hired on the basis of faith, unless there is some faith or mission, I suppose, unless there is some sort of aberration with the mission itself, or there is some other purpose that we're not aware of for the mission. So I feel like that's more of a question for religious organizations in this situation to clarify exactly what it is they're trying to achieve here, because if their aim is to improve the welfare and well-being of the community, I really don't understand why they wouldn't be hiring the people that are going to deliver that mission, regardless of that person's individual faith, identity, or anything else. If they have the skills and the values mindset, then why would you not hire them? I can't think of a reason why, so I don't really understand why this would be a problem for any religious organisation.
Thank you, Jack. And Cecily.
Thank you. The Greens take the position that if a government contract is in place for a service to be provided, that must be in the public interest. They're taxpayer-funded services, so the public's entitled to expect that contracts will reflect evidence-based requirements for these services, and will also be reflective of the values of a broad and diverse society. So religious providers, or any providers who don't feel that they can fit with those values, if they're seeking government funding, are free to not tender for those services where they believe there would be a clash with their beliefs or their values.
I'll just keep it short. I do support the protection of the freedom of faith-based organisations. I think the main issue here is the inherent requirement. Some jurisdictions require that if you're a teacher at a Christian school and you have to teach theology, to have that inherent requirement for you to be a Christian, to teach Christian theology, then the receptionist doesn't necessarily need to be a Christian. And then that again influences the flavour of that whole organisation, whether it's a school or a welfare organisation. So the idea is that if an organisation wants to have everybody having a certain level of belief or commitment to a faith statement, then that should be acceptable. And I think that's where Jack is misunderstanding there, because obviously the whole tenor of an organisation can be shaped by whether it's the receptionist, the gardener, or the teacher in a Christian school sense. So,
Thanks, Mark.
Faith-based organisations play a vital role in providing essential services and support to communities across Tasmania. We firmly believe in protecting the freedom of these organisations to operate according to their mission and values, including in matters of employment. Our party will advocate for legislation that safeguards the autonomy of faith-based organisations in hiring practices and ensures that government funding is not a contingent upon compromising their religious belief or identity. We recognise that valuable contribution of these organisations and will work to uphold their rights and freedoms. In my past life, I had the opportunity to travel, work rather than travel, literally around the world, from Pakistan to Africa to you name it. And one thing that I found in all those countries that they had in common, that people always congregated around the church. And the church, whatever religion it might have been or whatever organization, was the pivotal center of everybody, whatever they had problems, whatever, it wasn't just about weddings and everything. And I think this is what's so important, to have houses like the House of Hope and so on to support the community, because we're talking about the homeless people. They really have nowhere else to go to. So, yeah, well done and go for it.
Thank you, Michael. Janie.
Like the contributions of the Deputy Premier, Tasmanian Labor believe that the instruments are already exist in Tasmania for that, and we don't see a need for any changes. We believe that people should be supported to be who they are in the organisations as they are, but we equally believe that people shouldn't be denied opportunities because of who they are. But we believe that the legislation that is in place now, that has been in place, provides for that to happen in the community.
Thank you. Faith-based organizations should have freedom to operate according to their mission, to their hiring and employment policies. Churches and schools have the right to employ people and teach and act that is consistent with their belief, that group. And there is a freedom to employ any person regardless also of their faith. But the employed people also, they should respect the tradition of the church's teaching. In the hospital practice, for example, as a doctor, I mainly to act professionally with my patients, regardless of whether about my faith. And I think that's what it should be like as well at school and other organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Thank you for preparing well for those 4 questions. Much appreciated. We are going to move on. We'll have time for probably 2 at least questions. We started a few minutes late. But the first one, I'm going to combine 2 of the top rating questions, and they're health-related questions. If you don't want to speak on both parts of the question, you can just choose one. And if you don't want to comment at all, you're welcome to pass it along. The first part is, what will you do to get more GPs in the north of the state, and how will you respond to the LGH ramping and bed block? They're the 2 parts of the question.
Thank you.
2 minutes.
I've got the microphone. Thank you. That's great. Look, I must confess first, our hospital is one of the best hospitals I have practiced in my career. I have enjoyed it and I'm still enjoying working there. Life has changed a lot as well. Our population is getting older. People are getting sicker. You know, we in Tasmania, especially in northern Tasmania, have the highest rate of chronic health problems, which means there is more demand to hospital beds. We also have less nursing home beds. So that have impact on hospital. People waiting in the hospital for nursing home, and that reflected in congestion in the emergency department. How are we going to solve it? Well, we have to look at how can we discharge patients who are blocking bed in hospital, perhaps by increasing number of nursing home beds, or many people don't want to go to nursing home. If we can increase services to support them in going home. Lack of GPs, I think it's a major problem. We always said, like in hospital, if you want to employ somebody and stay in hospital, perhaps they should have some connection to Tasmania. I think that's the best way. We have so many people come and then they leave after a few years. I would like to address this in a different way. One of the sad things, only 53% of our students complete year 12 from year 10. That's shocking. That many people are denied studying and going to higher degrees, which have impacted on employment. One of my way to increase number of GP, I think government should take an active role in providing scholarship to our local student. Especially now, many students don't go and study because of the high university fees. And I think we should look at it seriously, because training our own student, more likely they would stay here.
It's always great to hear from someone at the hospital. So there have been a couple of opportunities this evening where, in the spirit of the evening, there could have been a political comment made or a reflection on something that's happened, and I've refrained from doing that. But on the issue of health, how absurd to say that you're going to ban ramping. I mean, it's just so disrespectful to the family members across Tasmania who have had someone who has died on a ramp or has not been able to have access to the hospital. We have the most incredible people working in the Launceston General Hospital and other hospitals across Tasmania. But what an absurd thing to say. We know that our district and regional hospitals are underutilised. On average, high 40s, low 50% utilisation. I was in Scottsdale today at the Mayshore Wing. I saw the Scottsdale Hospital. There is a ward there, the James Scott ward, that has got beds ready to go. We need to introduce into our districts and regions rural practitioners. We need allied health professionals. We need nurse practitioners so that we can care for people in the communities that they live in. We know they'll recover better when they're supported by the community. Just yesterday, I had a phone call from a distraught mother on Flinders Island, whose mother, so a grandmother, was transferred from St Helens to Launceston for care and was in the airlock overnight, scared and afraid on their own, without any family being able to visit because it was so full. These circumstances shouldn't happen in Tasmania. We need to take the pressure out of the hospital by being able to discharge people to places like nursing homes that perhaps have a reputation that is not exactly how people experience a nursing home these days. But we also need to utilise our district and regional hospitals to take pressure out of the LGH. We know that if you have 3 presentations in a district or regional hospital, it will cover the cost of someone going to Launceston General Hospital when they don't need to. We are investing just here in Bass, whether it be on Flinders Island, in Beaconsfield or in Scottsdale, on more practitioners to go there. We are providing scholarships for people to study at university, and we want to support Tasmanians to have these Tasmanian jobs as they are connected to place, because the costs of people coming in and nurses and doctors that are coming in is extraordinary, up to 4, 5, 10 times the amount of actually employing a local person, and that's not good enough for our community.
Okay, there were two questions there, and I think we got stuck on one. But as far as the housing concern up north, I really believe that any hospital, any clinics or whatever should have adjacent apartments. It's done all over the world, so the doctors can come and they know they will have a place to stay. They can look around, decide whether they want to stay in a community or in a state, and then look for a house. But I know, hate to admit, but my chiropractor just hired a person from England. They're looking for a house, just can't get it. So unless that is sorted, and again, it's not a difficult. We build normal apartments, nothing fancy, and this is that should be the same at every hospital. The second, the word ban was poorly chosen, I think, and obviously everybody latched onto it. Took my wife to hospital with broken ankle, and the first question everybody asked me, why did you drive her there? Why didn't you call an ambulance? So I would also like to look at another audit as how many people could have got there on their own, but it is easier to get an ambulance because you actually don't have to go to queue. They actually drive you around the back. So if you look at that whole system, I think it needs to be sorted out, and I think a lot of people could assist, but right now it's just easy enough to call the ambulance. And yes, the ambulance is like a taxi. You know, if it backs up, it backs up. If you haven't got a space inside, and I think that was well covered there, that's obviously consequence.
Thank you. On to Mark.
I appreciate all the comments, and I'm learning lots.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our hospitals are in a bit of a mess, aren't they? And the Greens are committed to fighting to fix our health system and to make healthcare more available for the people of Launceston. Our plans for doing that come across a couple of areas. We are looking at prevention and are funding preventative measures. This will ease some of the pressure. It's a long-term plan, but we need to be looking at reducing chronic disease in the community so that there's less need for people to go to hospital. In terms of the crisis that's happening in our hospitals at the moment, the Greens will fight to increase staffing at the LGH specifically by 40 extra nurses a year. And we will target where we employ those people. So the emergency department navigating nurses who will help get people through their planned pathways through the emergency department to relieve the pressure there. Discharge planners who will be able to make sure that from the time they come into the hospital to the time they leave, patients are working towards discharge in a timely manner to make those beds available. We're aware that we need to work on recruitment and retainment of staff because it's one thing to get nurses and other medical staff into the hospital, but keeping them there can be an issue, and we have released a policy of what we would do to do that around paying HECS fees for new staff and providing better leave conditions for people. And we want to see increased services within the LGH, so we will fund 24-hour, 7-day-a-week pathology and radiology services so that patients who are in the emergency department can get the diagnostic procedures they need to get a quicker diagnosis and be moving through, hopefully home, and getting the treatment they need and taking that pressure off. Thank you.
I'll probably deal with the first question, which was the GPs, I think, in the north. So, look, there's probably a number of things that we need to do in terms of encouraging people to come live and work here. I don't want to be too churlish about this idea of supporting degrees. It's the same with the nursing, I imagine, as well, around the state paying towards degrees. Not least because I got my social work degree in the UK through a paid tuition fees and even a supported bursary. But ultimately, the reality is that the introduction of tuition fees in the education system has crippled our ability to train people for the professions that we need the most. And I realize that's a federal matter, as not really a state, but I think it's one thing we definitely need to be doing as state representatives is advocating for a shift away from tuition fees, because it really is crippling our education system and the ability to train new doctors and nurses and other professionals. In terms of the ramping crisis, I'm honestly surprised with this government we haven't got to the point where they're trying to ban ambulances, never mind ramping. We are in a state, I talked before about the mentality that goes on in the government. We're in a state which has an obesity crisis, and yet somehow we are meant to celebrate the fact that there's going to be a chocolate fountain. Okay, there is something seriously skewed with the way that the Tasmanian government is operating. The hospital itself, the ambulance ramping, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on those systems, but one thing I do know about Lonnie General Hospital is about the Commission of Inquiry, is about the abuse that children have suffered there, is about how victim survivors and whistleblowers are so traumatized by the experience of that hospital, they will not go. One person I knew actually performed a medical procedure on themselves at home because the trauma of going to the hospital was so severe, they were not willing to seek emergency medical attention.
10 seconds.
That's how bad that situation is. We need to look at the recommendations from the Commission, look at the recommendations around the management and start to apply that across the board, because I guarantee you that is one of the issues. Yes, funding, major issue. Lack of staff, major issue. Lack of education, training ability, major issue. But it's also about management, leadership, and mentality from the very highest levels of the Tasmanian government.
We have doctors, one on each end, so I look forward to Julie's answer as well. We've increased health funding so much in the 10 years we've been in government, and it's still not enough. We've actually increased, I just noticed a Labor Party ad on TV, eating my bangers and mash tonight. They said we've cut health. We've put an extra $1 billion in, but it's not enough, and we need to continue to do more. And for the first time in the last about 3 years, we've now been reaching into federal area of responsibility as a state government. We shouldn't have to do it. Your state taxes should be able to be focused on areas of state responsibility. But we're now doing things that really the federal government should be doing, because GPs and funded by Medicare are thoroughly federal responsibilities. And I do hope that when the next federal election happens, there's a lot more focus on this. We've just announced we're going to employ directly 10 GPs that are available for not if, but when there's another crisis in a GP centre somewhere in Tasmania, so we can quickly deploy and look after that community. We're also providing, again, for the first time, HECS repayment options to encourage recruitment here in our community in Tasmania. Isn't it ironic? We'll actually be paying to the Commonwealth money to release graduates from their debts. And we're also moving to a single employer model, and time won't permit, but that's an innovation that we have done cooperatively with the Australian government to try to encourage more GPs that train here to stay here. But we're doing more at the hospital. The LGH does need our support. As Health Minister, I reopened all the wards that were closed previously and reopened and built a new one. And we're now partnering with the Launceston Health Hub just down on Wellington Street, and this time next year they'll have completed a new building, and we're taking out the top floor, which is an additional 20 beds, which will be LGH people will run it, and it'll be an extra outlet so that we can have better discharge and better flow and do deal with ramping, which is absolutely necessary at the LGH.
Thank you, Michael. And we'll finish with Julie.
Oh, lucky last. I'm just trying to remember the first part of the question. GPs.
So
okay.
GPs in the
GPs
north.
and ramping.
Yep.
All right. So I have experience in both areas.
We keep forgetting the GPs in the north.
Yeah. Well, GPs all over the state, really. As Michael outlined, there are some significant announcements that they've made as far as GPs go, and normally that does fall under the remit of the federal government, so it's actually good to see the Liberal Party taking responsibility for the bits that we can do, and I was particularly excited about the GP Now 10 GPs that are going to be able to go into a locality where a practice is closed to be able to nurse that community through that period of transition. But general practice in itself is actually experiencing a national crisis, and I was recently at a meeting where there were young medical students and in their first 1 or 2 year doctors, and they were talking about how the flow through of training of GPs is actually much less than it was when I was doing my GP training. So this is a problem nationwide, and it's something that we need to be proactive about. And training people from Tasmania, they're more likely often to come back to Tasmania because that's where our family are. That's what I did. But we need to make it attractive to them as well, because sometimes they become settled over, interstate or overseas, and the HECS debt initiative that the Liberal Party has announced is one way of doing that, because the HECS debts are significant after medical training. But we also need to make sure that we're taking a load off the healthcare system for a number of measures, and that includes preventative health, which has also been issued. And one of the things that I've noticed is that the health literacy of the communities as a whole needs work, and we need as government, as communities and individuals to be helping improve the health literacy so people can actually look after themselves. As far as ramping goes, that's a multi-dimensional problem as well, and so we need to be looking at factors both upstream and within the hospital system to be taking the load off, so that we're also not killing not only our patients, but we're actually looking after our staff as well, so that we're keeping them on board and we're not losing them in the process.
Thank you, Julie. Well finished. Thank you, candidates. I hope that you have learnt and got to know these candidates. I also want to acknowledge there's some Greens candidates in our audience who didn't come up and speak tonight. So thank you for being here and supporting Cecily in her role. I just wanted to let you know that power prices, forestry logging, aged care employment and our stadium were the other 4 major questions that came up. So I would encourage you to either quickly chat with these guys when we're finished or look up on their websites and be proactive in finding out their responses, which I'm sure are all available because they're very current issues, so that you can find out before election day what their positions are on that, because we have run out of time. I'm going to invite Anthea Maynard from City Baptist to close in prayer, because this isn't just a Door of Hope effort. It's an effort from churches and denominations around Tassie, and these candidate forums have been happening all around the state, and it's encouraging to see our faith congregations paying attention. So thank you, candidates, and Anthea is going to close for us.
Thank you. Thanks. Let's pray. Loving God, we thank you and praise you for your mercy, for your love, and for your grace. In this moment, we just pause, acknowledging that you know our heart's desires and also our heart aches. We acknowledge the blessing of your creation in this far-flung island or islands where we have the opportunity to have clean air, rich soils, diverse ecology, fresh water and freedom. We thank you for vibrant communities, your image bearers that have diverse needs, for creative business owners, for hardworking people in our community that do things voluntarily and through their paid employment. And we thank you for curious children. Tonight we acknowledge that your son Jesus showed us a different way of being, of doing and relating. And we thank you for that. And tonight we just pause also and acknowledge the effort, the energy, the sacrifice that these candidates and the candidates around Tasmania have invested in their hope to serve Tasmania. And I pray that you give them courage and strength as they continue this work. So we commit the election to you, Lord, and pray that the elected members can collaborate and be the best people they can be for the benefit of the Tasmanian community and the Tasmanian environment. I pray for us as community members that we can be generous, compassionate, and creative as we walk alongside each other every day. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Anthea. Thank you, everyone. Could you thank our team that has brought the candidate forum to you tonight? And all the best for the election, candidates. Thank you, everyone, for coming.